Well, good morning. Happy Sabbath. Anybody here make a New Year's resolution? No? Anybody here made New Year's resolutions in the past, and by the time you got to February, either A, you didn't remember what you actually resolved to do, or you didn't make very much progress, or maybe you're actually, I'm actually getting along on that. February is kind of the time where we start to look back. If you made a resolution, start saying, well, am I on the right path, etc., if I've even remembered that. Do you want to guess what the most resolved resolutions, if you will, are in the United States? Weight loss, what else? What do you think's on the list of people that are making resolutions? Health-related things. Okay, so a lot of nodding on that. So, according to Statista, America's top New Year's resolutions for 2025 were the following. To save more money, 21%. To eat healthier, 19%. To exercise more, 17%. To lose weight, 15%. To quit smoking, 9%. And to reduce spending, 9%. But as you can see, there's 43% of the population, at least the ones that they surveyed, that said they didn't make a New Year's resolution at all. So you guys nailed it at the very beginning. People are making New Year's resolutions, and most of these ones, the top 5, have something to do with some kind of health, right? In there we see to eat healthier, to exercise more, to lose weight, and even to spend more time with friends and family is one that we saw there too, right? What is to spend more time with friends and family, right? That's the idea of slowing down, this idea of what we call social health, all those different things. Now, I don't know about you, but I definitely make New Year's resolutions, and I'm probably one of the outliers on there where I'm like, I'm going to track the resolutions. Now, do they all turn out great and they're all fabulous and I've done them all? No. But the past several years, I've definitely been tracking them. So I found it very interesting that many goals that we set have to do with health, because it's one of those things that I think a lot of us take for granted. But as Seventh-day Adventist, we should not be taking that for granted, because we have a rich history of a health message that sometimes we are listening and we hear, and other times I'm sure we're like, what is that again? Like, we kind of know the general rule, or what do people like tell us to go, oh yeah, you're the ones that don't eat meat, which is not entirely true, we know that, but they tend to kind of think of it that way, like, oh, you guys, you eat weird stuff or whatever. And it's like, okay, but is that the heart of that message? What is this all about? So I wanted to start a new series talking about the idea of health and what the Bible has to say about that. But I wanted to start at the very beginning with this idea of rest. So I'm going to tell you a story here. So when I was a student dean, this was between my sophomore and junior year of college, I went to be a student dean, took a year off. And part of the task when it was a boarding academy, so those of you who know the setup there, I'm the assistant dean working under a head dean, and part of the task was to open and shut the dorm building every morning and evening. And for that year, what I would have to do is, in the evening, I would get myself all ready and I would check in with the RAs or resident assistants who were also monitoring their halls, make sure that yep, all our people are tucked in, check in that they're good. Okay, I'd go lock the door. Then I would go to bed, and then I would be the first one up the next morning to unlock the door to let the kitchen people out. Which maybe initially you go, what's the big deal about that? That basically meant I was the last one to bed and the first one up, and I was only getting 6 hours of sleep. Now, some of you are already going to laugh because you might be like, oh, 6 hours of sleep is great. But for me, 6 hours of sleep was brutal. I'm going to back up the story a little bit further, because when I was in high school, I'm the kid who knew exactly, by the way, does anybody know what the average adult is supposed to have for actual sleep? Yeah, 7 to 9 hours. 8's a great number right in the middle. Kind of doesn't matter who you are there. You can try to argue with that, but that's the general gist, 7 to 9 hours. So you might think, well, at that point I was getting 6 hours of sleep, so I'm not that far off. It's like one hour off. But keep in mind I was also a young adult, and we need more sleep in our earlier life. But in high school, I needed even more sleep. You all know this. You've been teenagers yourself. You've seen teenagers. We need a lot more sleep. And in high school, I happened to know, because I knew this, I needed 9 hours of sleep. So in high school, I would literally put myself to bed like I'm not kidding, 9 o'clock at night, because we had an early start the next day for school, and our school started like at 7 or something like that. It was something crazy now that I think of it. I'm like, oh my goodness. And if it wasn't school, it was going to whatever part-time job that I had to do the two things. But I was getting 9 hours sleep. So I'm coming off of, this is the kind of mentality as a high school student that I knew I needed 9 hours. And even when I was in college, I was like, I need my sleep. I refused to pull an all-nighter. Again, maybe I was a little bit strange as a college student. I refused to do it. And I'm glad to say that the research does prove that if you do pull all-nighters trying to just cram information in, you don't retain the information as well. So I figured that out kind of just naturally. Maybe some of you have stories like that too, where you just kind of realize you just don't function as well on less sleep. And so I refused to do that. So all my college life, I was not pulling all-nighters. I was not staying up super late. I was getting my rest. And then I spent a year at this academy, and I was dying because I was so tired. And you know what happened that year? It was a great year in terms of, you guys have heard parts of the story where I figured out what I actually wanted to do with my life, hence how I ended up here. But I got really sick. Towards the end of that year, I got really sick. And it was like I was down for the count. They had to pump me full of, I don't even know what it was, to pump me up. And of course, I'm still on the clock, still opening doors, shutting doors. And it was just brutal. And it was one of the things at the end of the year when they were asking me, would you like to stay and finish this year out? The top of my list, I'm not kidding, was no, I cannot do the sleep deprivation that goes with this job. And I went back to school, of course, and back to getting a good night's sleep. But I'm not alone in this. Certainly I was I'm going to go back and I'm going to get my sleep. Because we have a problem as Americans with sleep in general. And I'm sure this will not come as a surprise to any of you what those problems are. Maybe you've experienced them yourselves. Maybe you know people around you that have difficulty sleeping. I am blessed to be a good sleeper, as they say, although my sister gets really annoyed at me because when we fly somewhere, some of you will relate to this, you put me on the plane, I will go to sleep. You put my sister on the plane next to me, she's wide awake the entire time. And she's like, it is very unfair that you can, I wouldn't say I can go to sleep anywhere, but she's like, it's very unfair that you can just go to sleep, and my eyes are glued open. But that's a very specific circumstance. On average, though, where Americans are having problems with sleep is economic pressures and schedules. In other words, we are building too much into our days. Maybe our work days are too long. Our commute times, which in Wrangell is probably a relative non-issue, which is why we're spoiled. Yeah, a relative non-issue. Those of you who live further out on the road have an actual commute, but you don't have traffic, right? You just gotta be able to make it out there. But still, the idea of longer and longer working hours, and also in the economy that we have now, right? We've got to make money. People are working multiple jobs to make ends meet. We're sacrificing sleep. I see this all the time in the work that I do. People are sacrificing sleep because they're like, I've got to, be able to pay the bills. I've got to do all these different things. And I don't, tell them, oh, you've got to stop doing that, because I understand that. But at what cost are we doing this to ourselves? And then, of course, the rise in technology, right? We have a lot more things. This is not a technology thing. But, we all have phones. So pretend like this is a phone, right? That we now know, right? The blue light and stuff like that, if you're on it for extended periods of time, especially in the evening, will make it harder for your brain to want to go into sleep modes. Hence why some of the recommendations now is to put those phones down, or at least put them on sleep mode an hour before you try to put yourself to bed. But the average American is only getting 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep, which I thought was well, that's not bad. That's pretty good. But then I realized that's an average. So there's people like myself who are nope, I need a good solid 8 hours. And then there are going to people, and I know these people personally, people who are getting by on 4 hours of sleep. It's difficult. And this will come to no surprise to those of you, especially who have ever been working parents. Working parents, college students, and shift workers get an average of 6 hours a night. Probably nobody's surprised there, especially the parents part, where you're trying to get your job done, take care of the kids, put them to bed, etc. Is probably, like I was talking about the student deaning, you are the last one down and the first one up. So what are some of the consequences to that? I bet you guys can already, this, by the way, I have a whole list up here. I won't even redo the whole thing. This is a whole list of actual consequences to not getting enough sleep. But here's a couple for us to just think about. Slower reaction time. This is why research now tells us that if you are tired, it's almost as bad driving as, or maybe worse, than if you were drinking and got in the car. How many of us have driven tired? How many will confess that we've driven tired, right? We might not think twice about doing that, but we're not going to drink and drive, which is good too, but we will get in a car and be really, really tired, and that can be problematic. And anybody who's ever been in that situation, you know that is a little bit scary. We can have impaired memory. We can have increased anxiety and depression. This is where I end up seeing a lot of people. I'll ask, how much are you sleeping? Because literally, if you're not getting enough sleep, you're stressing your body out, which is anxiety. Adding to the anxiety. Not that is the only thing, but it can certainly help. Accelerate aging of the brain, chronic health problems, all of these things can be consequences. We can look at additional mental health consequences, mood swings. We can look at cognitive consequences where we have difficulty concentrating and making decisions. It's huge, right? And you yourself, if you think about the times where you didn't get enough sleep, what were you like? I will add, I know that when I have not gotten enough sleep, and it's usually when we're traveling, because it's the ferry, which I know is not the best running right now, but if you've ever done the ferries are always at weird hours. So you're at weird hours, and not only that too, if you're traveling, not necessarily on the Wrangell side, but trying to get into Wrangell, sometimes there are ridiculously early or late evenings that you're trying to get on things, and I will tell you, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm irritable. I'm like, do not talk to me until I've had enough sleep there. And so I don't know what your consequences are, but I'm sure you guys have all been there. Or if you've ever been slap happy or trying to recall something and you just can't when you're in that tired state. So let's flip this around then. We're not here to just sit on oh, if you don't get enough sleep, bleh, because some of you might be like, yeah, that's me. And you wouldn't be alone, as we just said, because the average American doesn't get enough sleep. So if there are people in here who are like, well, great, now what? But let's at least talk about, so what are the benefits of even doing this? Because I think right now, the average American thinks that they need to make enough money, they need to do da-da-da-da-da. We're really driven by filling those schedules and not really thinking about, well, what is sleep actually doing for us? Again, have a whole nother list on the other page of all the benefits, which are just as long as what we saw consequences. And so we see things like memory consolidation, and learning enhancement. This is what I was talking about earlier, that I kind of knew in high school, that I was like, there's no point in staying up all night, being tired, and trying to go into a test. I better have studied, or if I don't know it, I was like, I still won't know it the next day, and I'll just be tired. But it's because we now know that the brain, when it's sleeping, especially during REM cycle, is taking all that information and filing it and putting it in the right spots, and you can retain stuff a lot easier that way. So if you need to make a big decision, this is why people say sleep on it, because your brain will have a chance to consolidate information and hopefully give you a chance to sort through that decision the next day. Strengthening your immune system. This is why I mentioned I got sick that year, very sick that year, because my immune system was compromised because I was so tired all the time. More stable mood, increased energy. These are things you guys probably all know of. There's some other ones over here. Better work efficiency, believe it or not, if you're getting sleep. I don't know if you've ever noticed, not even just with sleep, if you've ever been working on something and you're just either just really brain tired or tired, and you're like, oh, I want to finish this, but you're just getting bogged down because you're tired and it's slow, depending upon the time of day, right? Sometimes it's a matter of, I try now, if I notice that, especially at home, get up, go do something else, shift gears, get up, move around, etc. And this is assuming that's not near bedtime where I should just go to bed. And go do something else. And have you ever noticed, when you come back to whatever it is, or you come back the next day, you're like, wow, that went a lot faster. There's a lot of efficiency that sleep gives us as well. And we can think of plenty of other things. Even in here, believe it or not, better appetite regulation, right? We're talking about people's New Year's resolution for weight loss. Believe it or not, getting sleep will help with that, will help regulate that because you don't have that stress in your system, or at least less stress in your system, lowering inflammation levels. I mean, there's so many different benefits to getting enough rest. Now, as a good Seventh-day Adventist, if I left it just there, I would be doing you an injustice. If I was just like, okay, just get enough sleep, that's it, sermon time is over, that's all you need to know, we'd be missing a very key aspect of it. And that is, what does the Bible actually tell us about rest? Because the Bible has a lot to say about rest. Not only does the Bible speak on, we were talking quite a bit here about physical rest, but it talks about rest as restoration. It talks about rest as trust. And it also, of course, right, what's in the first part of our name? Seventh-day Adventist, right? The seventh-day Sabbath. I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to talk about that and how that can improve our health. So, physical rest. We're going to look at just a couple of verses per. There's lots in the Bible, but we're only going to use a couple of them. And this is Psalms 4:8. In peace, I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. I love this verse. When I was reading through the Psalms not too long ago, I saw this verse, and I thought, wow, this speaks directly to that idea of what are some of the sleep issues that people have. And what I hear people report a lot of times is they lay down and they go, well, I go down to go to sleep, and then suddenly my mind is like, ding, don't forget to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, or running through the anxieties of the day, or tomorrow I've got to do da-da-da-da-da. Or if they do get to sleep, some of you probably have experienced this. I'll tell you a little funny on this. You wake up at like 3 in the morning. So you made it to sleep, and you wake up at 3 in the morning, and then your brain's like, so by the way, don't forget da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This happened to me this past week, and it was actually, Brian saying it's funny, I don't think it was anxiety related. I happened to hear a song, and I was reading the story about some celebrity or whatever, and did I care an awful lot one way or the other about the celebrity? Not really, but the song was kind of a funny parody, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's kind of just funny. And that was like one of the last things-ish that I like heard or had in my brain before I went to bed. And believe it or not, I woke up at 3 in the morning with that song running in my head. Nothing else, just woke up at 3 thinking about this song running around. I was like, okay, I don't know why we're waking up wondering about this particular song, but we were, and that's a little funny. And of course, that's not necessarily anxiety, but we've all been there when the brain wakes you up at night. And so I love this verse because Scripture acknowledges the importance of physical rest and sleep for well-being, right? God created us to have rest. He created actual physical rest. We've got a cycle every day. We've got 24 hours, and roughly, as we've said, 8 of those hours are dedicated to closing your eyeballs and going to sleep. And you get the whole rest of the time, 16 hours or so, to do other things. God has provided that cycle of rest and renewal just right in our days. And I think we take that for granted, and we just think, oh, I'm just going to push it a little bit further. And as we said, we don't need to, because what is it said here? It says, in peace, God given us peace, I will lie down and sleep, for you alone make me dwell in safety. And what's the thing that our brains really need when we're lying down to sleep? You can't sleep very well if you don't feel, number one, comfortable, and you don't feel safe. It is very hard to sleep in a situation where you're stressed out, or physically in a situation where you do not feel safe, right? Because your brain is going to stay on to help protect you from whatever it is. And that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is trying to protect you from whatever it is that you're thinking about there. But God is offering us peace and saying, lay down, rest, sleep, because he provides us with safety. So this next one is rest as restoration. You guys know parts of this. This is Psalms 23. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. You guys know this one very well, because the Bible portrays rest as restorative and healing. And science proves that out time and time again. There are people, and there's a great book written by a guy that researches sleep all the time. That's all he does. And the book is pretty thick, and it hits all the different sleep things. And yes, I did read it before this. all the different sleep things that are in here. And what's very fascinating, while this guy is not a Christian, not professing to be a Christian, these cycles of rest and healing and restoration, he points out in the research time and time again. And it's interesting too, by the way, if you're also somebody who's like, well, I think I can just get by on less than 7 hours of sleep. He did research on that too. He says a lot of people go, well, I can get by on 4 to 6 hours. And he did the research on that, and come to find out there is a gene that will allow some people to get by on 6 hours of sleep. But here's the thing. It's probably not any of us in this room, because it's a very rare gene from a specific place in Italy. So if you're not from that specific place in Italy, you're probably not one of those people. It's very, very rare. So don't try to use that as an excuse. Because over and over again, he points out that when we're not getting enough rest, we can't get the healing that we need. People that are getting rest are able to heal. This is also why when we're sick, which all of us are familiar with this, people have been sick recently too, why you're so tired, you need to spend a little extra time, laying down or whatever, because there's healing happening while we're resting through that, even though sometimes we want to be able to push through that. And then you guys know this, Jesus said, this is Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." You probably thought of this exactly at the very beginning when you saw the title, Come Rest. This is probably what you're thinking of, the invitation that Jesus is making to us. Jesus presents spiritual rest as a gift and connects it to physical rest with spiritual renewal. Hand in hand, he's saying our physical rest, our spiritual needs, all these things go together. He's offering us rest. And I know we all know this, right? And once again, we saw this in the verse before, on the one that said, you'll make me lie down in peace. He says, what will he do for us? All you who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. Who's going to give us rest? Jesus is going to give us rest. Now, rest is trust. Psalms 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." I saw in Sabbath school they mentioned another one that was great too, in rest and calm will come your healing. The Bible often connects rest with trusting in God's provision rather than relying solely on human effort. What I love about this one is I think about it this way. When I lie down at night and I'm going to sleep, you may not think of it this way, and you're like, how is that suddenly spiritual? But I think of it this way, that those 8 whatever hours that my eyes are closed, God is still carrying that world. He doesn't need me to be awake to manage this world with him, right? He's still watching over me, still watching over the world, because in another part of the world, it's daylight time, right? Because of the way our world spins, there's people always up somewhere in the world, and there's people always sleeping somewhere in the world. And so those 8 hours, he doesn't need me to be up worrying and controlling the world. It's me putting a trust in the world will be here when I wake up. Stuff will be here when I get up in the morning. And I just love that idea of recognizing that. I also think of the same way with the Sabbath. When we think about a Sabbath, what is Sabbath? Right? It's a time for rest, but it's also a time to show that you don't think the world will fall apart if you take 24 hours off, right? That 24 hours for having Sabbath means that I'm trusting that God is taking care of things during these 24 hours. So I love that idea. So you guys know this is Exodus 8:28-10. "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God." And it says here, this establishes rest as a commandment and not just a suggestion. Now, you might be like, oh, that sounds kind of harsh. He's like forcing us to rest. But I mean, think about that. What kind of God is like, you rest, let me do all the work? Because if you look at any other religions, or if you look at any other things that we're chasing after, what are we doing, right? It's always more, more, more. You do more, more, more. You work harder. You do all these different things, right? And if you look at religions where you've got to, you got to work your way, it's a way of works. That's not what Christianity at its basis is. That's not what Sabbath is about. It's not working your way to that. When you're taking a Sabbath, you're basically saying, I understand that I can't earn my way into anything. So maybe you hadn't thought of it that way, but Sabbath is also putting it out there to say, really, this isn't about me. God is still going to control the world. And he gives that to you as like, no, you get to rest. Yes, I want to be able to rest. Now, I want to point out this other quote here Before I do, I just want to also recognize too that we're talking here about the difference between like building habits to get better sleep and trust. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't build better habits. In fact, I'll just mention real briefly, there are things, we call them sleep hygiene, that you can do to get better sleep. And some of you probably know these, some of you just do these already. And it includes, like we said earlier, putting the devices in sleep mode or turning them off an hour before you go to bed, not having them on in such a way that they can interrupt your sleep. It includes working on getting yourself to bed and getting up at about the same time, because that'll help your body get into that cycle. It includes when you are getting ready for bed that you're not doing like some of us do, where we're like run all the way up to time for bed and you just plop in. This always drives me a little nuts when you guys ever seen these movies where they're like run, and then they go to bed and they just like plop in and they're in their jeans and whatever, and they're just out. I'm like, wow, they didn't even like put on PJs or anything like that. Like, that's not what we're looking for. Take the time to like do whatever you need to do to decompress. Good time to have a little Bible reading. Good time to just read a low-key book. Don't watch any scary movies before you go to bed. They're probably just not good for you in general anyways, but anything that's going to be really activating, all those things can be really helpful. So yes, please look into those things we need to build better sleep hygiene. What I'm trying to help us think about is think about the principle behind, like, why are we doing these things? And so this is a wonderful quote from a book, Christ and the Sabbath by William Prescott. And it says, "The Sabbath was a memorial of the fact that God in Christ rested from his work." Who rested from the work? God even rested, right? Like, think about that. Even God himself is like, we get to take a break. The Sabbath is a sign to the Christian that he has rested from his work, and that the power of God is working in him both to will and to do his good pleasure. Right? The Sabbath was designed before there was sin in the world, right? That 6 days and then into Sabbath was designed before people could even be tired. And Adam and Eve were made on Friday, so how could they have been tired by Saturday, right? So God already set this out to say, here you go, here's a Sabbath, here's a chance to rest. God already was like, get some rest here. And I think it's just so wonderful that God has given us this gift, because ultimately what we're talking about here is health. Good health is a gift. We all know this. We were talking this morning about loved ones who've been through their own health scares, and thankfully, as we heard some good news there, that are getting better. We maybe have been through our own health scares. We know that even if you've just been sick, if you're like me, if I get a cold, I'm like miserable. I'm like, oh, when will I ever be whole again? And it's just the cold, right? I know that like 7 days and I'm likely to bounce back. But some of us have been through things that were much harder than just 7 days of a cold with our health, right? Maybe we're dealing with some kind of food allergies. Maybe we're dealing with not getting enough sleep and we're just run down, all those different things. And God is asking us to trust in him. Trust that what he's offering us to do, he's offering us rest, folks. Who doesn't want rest? Right? Like that to me is just so beautiful. So as we think about this and wrap it up, ultimately, let's do this. Let us rest in him. I'm going to have a word of prayer actually now, and then we're going to go to music. Lord, we thank you for the reminder that you're a loving God who asked us to rest, asked us to trust in you, that when we're sleeping or taking a break or taking a Sabbath, that you are still in control of the world, and that you offer us something so wonderful. And this gift of health, Lord, we do not take it for granted. Please, Lord, help us to put our trust in you in such a way that it can be seen that we are Christians and that we are part of your family. Amen.